When someone attempts to diminish your worth with insults or tries to define you by their words, you are presented with a choice, either to absorb their negativity and let it weaken you, or to convert it into power and prove that you are far greater than the box they try to place you in. The story of Rudy Giuliani calling Jasmine Crockett a mistake is not just about a political exchange, it is a perfect example of how people in positions of authority or influence often use dismissive language to undermine others. But in that moment, what mattered most was not the insult itself but how Jasmine Crockett transformed it into a declaration of her strength. That transformation is the lesson we must focus on. Insults can pierce deeply when we allow them to attach themselves to our identity, but if we recognize them for what they are, projections of someone else's insecurity, fear, or prejudice, then we can reclaim control of the narrative. Instead of reacting with anger or retreat, we can redirect the energy of an insult into clarity, focus, and momentum. Every insult, no matter how harsh, is also a reflection of the speaker. When Giuliani uttered those words, what it revealed was not Crockett's failure, but his desperation. The attempt to reduce her to a mistake was an act of weakness disguised as authority. Recognizing this dynamic allows us to shift perspective. Rather than seeing the insult as evidence of our shortcomings, we see it as evidence of the other person's inability to acknowledge our strength. That recognition is where the transformation begins, because when you no longer internalize the insult, you rob it of its power. Every individual has encountered situations where they were belittled, underestimated, or dismissed. Perhaps it came from a boss who doubted your abilities, a teacher who said you wouldn't succeed, a friend who mocked your ambitions, or even a family member who labeled your dreams as foolish. These words can linger in the mind, planting seeds of doubt. But here lies the truth: no insult defines your worth unless you allow it to take root. Crockett's response to Giuliani was not just words spoken in defiance, it was an example of how to rise above the trap of self-doubt. She did not argue on his level, she elevated the conversation by showing strength in composure and confidence in her convictions. That is a skill anyone can develop. When someone tries to cut you down with words, you can stand taller by affirming your own truth rather than absorbing theirs. It is about reclaiming the space of power that an insult attempts to occupy. Instead of letting their words shape your story, you use their attempt to belittle you as a platform to elevate yourself. This requires mental discipline, because the instinctive human reaction to insult is either retreat or retaliation. But when you learn to pause, process, and respond with clarity, you gain control over the narrative. The very insult that was meant to reduce you becomes the foundation of your strength. Think about history and the countless figures who were told they were not enough. Thomas Edison was told he was too stupid to learn anything, Oprah Winfrey was labeled unfit for television, Nelson Mandela was branded a criminal. If they had accepted those labels, the world would never have witnessed their greatness. What separates people who rise from those who retreat is not the absence of insults but the mastery of turning those insults into power. Giuliani's words were meant to diminish Crockett, yet in her refusal to bow down, she not only defended her dignity but also amplified her influence. This shows us a universal truth: people's attempts to limit you are often a reflection of their fear of your potential. If you internalize their labels, you shrink to fit their comfort zone. If you reject those labels, you step into your own greatness. Turning insults into power also means understanding that every word hurled against you carries energy, and energy is something that can be redirected. Just like a martial artist redirects the force of an opponent's strike to their advantage, you can redirect the force of criticism. Instead of letting it knock you down, you pivot and let it propel you forward. The key is perspective. If you hear, "You're a mistake," and internalize it as, "I'm worthless," then you are giving away your power. But if you hear those same words and translate them as, "They see my presence as a threat," then you gain strength from the recognition that your existence challenges the status quo. Giuliani's insult was not rooted in truth, it was rooted in discomfort. Crockett represented a voice he could not control, a presence he could not diminish, and so he tried to reduce her with words. But the attempt backfired because she refused to let the insult shape her narrative. In our own lives, we must learn this same resilience. Whether in the workplace, in relationships, or in society at large, there will always be voices that tell us we are less than what we are. The question is whether we let those voices write our story. If you can take an insult and turn it into motivation, you will always stay ahead. Imagine a coach telling an athlete that they will never make it, and instead of breaking down, that athlete trains harder, sharper, and with greater determination, eventually surpassing expectations. The insult became fuel. Imagine a student told they are not smart enough, yet instead of surrendering, they study relentlessly and prove everyone wrong. The insult became power. These examples show us that words, though powerful, only carry the meaning we assign to them. If you choose to assign them a destructive meaning, they will destroy you. If you choose to assign them a constructive meaning, they will build you. There is also a deeper layer to this. Insults can awaken in us a strength we did not know we had. Sometimes the greatest growth emerges not from comfort or encouragement but from being tested by adversity. When Giuliani called Crockett a mistake, it was a test. Would she fold under the weight of his words, or would she rise? She chose to rise, and in doing so, she demonstrated that an insult can be transformed into a defining moment. In our personal journeys, we too encounter these defining moments. It may not happen on live television, but it might happen in a meeting, in a conversation, or even in an offhand comment from someone who does not understand your value. In that moment, your response matters. Will you internalize their insult, or will you reclaim your power? When you respond with strength, you not only protect your dignity but also inspire others to do the same. People watching Crockett saw more than just a comeback, they saw a model of courage. That ripple effect is what makes turning insults into power so transformational. Finally, it is important to remember that insults are temporary, but the way you respond to them can define your legacy. Giuliani's insult will be forgotten as just another petty remark, but Crockett's response will be remembered as a moment of empowerment. That is the lesson we must carry with us. Words meant to break you can, if you choose, become the very spark that builds you. The insult is not the end of the story, it is the beginning of your rise. Owning your voice is one of the most powerful acts of self-empowerment you can commit to, because in a world where so many try to silence, dismiss, or overshadow you, your voice is your anchor, your compass, and your weapon. When Rudy Giuliani dismissed Jasmine Crockett and tried to brand her with belittling words, the situation was more than just a political jab, it was an attempt to strip her of her authority and credibility. But what followed demonstrated what it truly means to own your voice, because Crockett didn't back away, she didn't let the insult hang in the air unchallenged, and she didn't shrink in the presence of someone who believed he could overpower her. She spoke with confidence, with precision, and with unwavering clarity. That choice is what turned the encounter from a cheap attempt at humiliation into a defining moment of strength. Owning your voice does not mean shouting the loudest, it means speaking with such conviction and authenticity that even those who seek to silence you cannot ignore your presence. Too many people underestimate the importance of their own voice. They believe that their ideas are too small, their experiences too unimportant, or their presence too insignificant to matter. They hold back in meetings, they hesitate in conversations, they swallow their truth for fear of conflict or rejection. Over time, this silence builds into a habit, and the world never hears the brilliance that lives inside them. That is why owning your voice is not optional, it is essential. Because if you do not speak your truth, someone else will gladly define it for you. Giuliani attempted to define Crockett with the label of a mistake, but because she had already mastered the strength of her voice, she was able to reject his definition and replace it with her own. This is the heart of power, the refusal to let others narrate your story, and the courage to claim it for yourself. Owning your voice also requires a deep belief in the value of what you bring to the table. When you believe in the truth of your words, that belief radiates outward, and people cannot help but take notice. Think about leaders, activists, and change-makers throughout history. Martin Luther King Jr. did not own the loudest voice in the room, but he owned the most authentic one. Malala Yousafzai faced threats and violence, but her voice carried the undeniable weight of truth and courage. Their voices were not powerful because of volume, but because they were rooted in conviction. When you know what you stand for and you refuse to waver, your voice becomes a force that even the harshest critics cannot dismantle. Crockett showed that same quality when she responded to Giuliani. She wasn't simply defending herself, she was affirming her right to exist in the space with authority. That is the essence of owning your voice, claiming your space without apology. In everyday life, this principle applies just as much as it does in public confrontations. In workplaces, many people are overlooked because they don't assert their ideas. They wait for someone else to validate them, or they hold back out of fear of making mistakes. But here's the truth, no progress has ever been made without someone daring to speak. Owning your voice means trusting that your perspective matters, even when others dismiss it. It means raising your hand in the meeting when everyone else stays quiet. It means asking for the opportunity you deserve rather than waiting for it to be handed to you. It means telling your story on your own terms instead of letting others shape it. Every time you claim your space through your words, you strengthen the muscle of confidence. Crockett's confidence didn't appear overnight, it was built through a lifetime of choosing to speak when others expected silence, and that is the kind of practice anyone can embrace. The truth is that owning your voice is not always comfortable. It will invite resistance. It will attract criticism. It will make some people uneasy, because your voice threatens the status quo they benefit from. That is why people like Giuliani resort to dismissive labels. They know that if your voice rises, it challenges their control. But discomfort is not a reason to retreat, it is proof that your voice carries weight. Think of how many revolutions, movements, and societal shifts began with a single person refusing to be silent. Owning your voice is not just about you, it is about everyone who sees you and realizes they too can stand taller. When Crockett responded on air, she wasn't only reclaiming her dignity, she was showing millions of others that no matter how powerful or established the critic, their voice cannot erase your truth. That kind of courage is contagious, and it plants seeds of confidence in everyone who witnesses it. Another critical element of owning your voice is authenticity. Too often, people try to imitate the style of others when they speak. They adopt someone else's tone, someone else's rhythm, or someone else's vocabulary in hopes of sounding credible. But the strongest voices are never copies, they are genuine reflections of the individual behind them. Your voice becomes powerful when it sounds like you, when it reflects your values, your experiences, and your personality. Crockett did not try to outdo Giuliani by mimicking his aggression or sinking to his level. She stayed true to herself, speaking in her own tone, with her own authority, and that authenticity made her response resonate even more. When you own your voice, you don't need to compete with others. You simply need to show up as yourself, fully and unapologetically. That is what people connect with, not the performance of strength, but the embodiment of it. Owning your voice also means using it with responsibility. Words are powerful, and once spoken, they cannot be taken back. To truly own your voice is not just to use it loudly, but to use it wisely. It means speaking truth, not noise. It means addressing injustice, not adding to it. It means lifting others up, not tearing them down. Crockett's response worked because it was rooted in truth and carried a greater purpose than simply clapping back. She wasn't trying to win a petty argument, she was standing for dignity and respect. In our lives, when we own our voices, we must do the same. Our words should not be weapons of destruction but instruments of clarity, empowerment, and change. To own your voice is to recognize that what you say has the power to shape minds, influence hearts, and direct futures. That responsibility is as important as the courage to speak itself. There is also a discipline in silence that comes with owning your voice. Many people think strength is in speaking constantly, but often strength is in knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. Silence used wisely is also a form of voice, because it shows you are not reacting emotionally to provocation but choosing moments with intentionality. Crockett could have erupted in anger, but instead she measured her response, using her words as precision tools rather than blunt weapons. This is what it means to truly own your voice. You are in control of it, not the other way around. Your voice does not spill out in reaction to every insult, it emerges with clarity and force when it matters most. That kind of discipline transforms ordinary speech into powerful communication. Owning your voice also transforms relationships. People learn how to treat you based on how you speak about yourself and how you respond when others try to diminish you. If you stay silent when someone disrespects you, you silently teach them that it is acceptable. If you speak up with confidence and self-respect, you teach them to treat you accordingly. Crockett's exchange with Giuliani was more than a personal defense, it was a boundary-setting moment. It was a declaration that she would not allow anyone, no matter how established, to define her worth. This same principle applies to all of us. In every interaction, we are teaching others how to treat us by the way we use our voices. To own your voice is to establish your boundaries, affirm your value, and demand the respect you deserve. At its core, owning your voice is about liberation. It is about freeing yourself from the fear of judgment, the weight of doubt, and the chains of external validation. When you own your voice, you no longer wait for permission to exist fully, you take up the space that was always yours to claim. Giuliani's words were an attempt to restrict that space, but Crockett expanded it instead. That is the lesson for everyone who has ever been silenced. Your voice is not something you wait for others to approve, it is something you choose to unleash. When you believe in your truth, when you trust the value of your words, when you commit to authenticity and responsibility, your voice becomes unstoppable. It becomes the tool through which you carve out your identity, assert your presence, and inspire others to do the same. Redefining legacy begins the moment someone chooses not to be confined by the narratives imposed on them but instead creates their own. When Rudy Giuliani attempted to reduce Jasmine Crockett to a mistake, he was trying to write her story in a way that diminished her significance. Yet what unfolded was the exact opposite, because her response shifted the meaning of that exchange and turned it into a moment of empowerment that people will remember long after his words are forgotten. That is the nature of legacy, it is not determined by the insult itself but by the way one responds to it. Legacy is the story that lingers, the echo that outlives the moment, the impression that endures even when the initial circumstances fade. Giuliani's words were fleeting, but Crockett's comeback carved a permanent mark, and that is what it means to redefine legacy, to take control of how you will be remembered, not through the insults you endure but through the strength you embody in response. Too often, people believe legacy is only about what you achieve in grand, public ways, but legacy is built in every choice you make about how to show up. It is written in how you treat people, how you respond to challenges, how you carry yourself when the spotlight is on you and when it isn't. Crockett's legacy in that moment was not defined by Giuliani's attempt to silence her but by her refusal to let his words shape her identity. That single decision to respond with conviction became more than a defense, it became a narrative-shifting event. This is true for all of us. Every time someone questions your worth, every time someone underestimates your potential, you are given the opportunity to define what will be remembered. Will people remember your silence, your retreat, your acceptance of someone else's definition of you, or will they remember the way you rose above and claimed your own truth? Redefining legacy also requires a shift in how we see setbacks, insults, and criticisms. Many people treat them as stains on their reputation, moments to be hidden or forgotten. But the most powerful legacies are often forged in fire. Legacies are not made by avoiding conflict, they are made by rising through it. When Giuliani called Crockett a mistake, he thought he was weakening her credibility, but instead he provided the stage for her to demonstrate resilience, wit, and authority. That moment of attempted humiliation became the spark for an even greater impression. The truth is that the very things people throw at you to diminish you can become the foundation of how you are remembered, if you have the courage to transform them. Think about leaders, athletes, artists, and activists whose legacies were not defined by the obstacles they faced but by the way they responded to those obstacles. The rejection letters, the failures, the insults, these became part of the story that made their eventual success all the more powerful. Redefining legacy means seeing every attempt to break you as an opportunity to build something lasting. It is also important to realize that legacy is not about perfection. People often assume that to leave a legacy, you must never falter, never be criticized, never face insult. But in truth, it is not the absence of difficulty that defines legacy, it is the presence of resilience. Crockett did not enter that conversation expecting to be called a mistake, yet when it happened, she had a choice. She could let it define her, or she could redefine the moment. By responding with courage, she showed that legacy is created in the unpredictable, unscripted moments when character is tested. Similarly, in our lives, our legacies are not built in the perfectly planned moments but in the times when we are challenged, doubted, or even ridiculed. How we respond in those moments becomes what people remember, and more importantly, it becomes what we remember about ourselves. Legacy is as much about internal memory as it is about external perception. When you look back at your own story, will you see moments where you gave away your power, or will you see moments where you rose and claimed it? Redefining legacy also means shifting focus from temporary validation to lasting impact. Giuliani's insult was a fleeting attempt to score points in a moment of confrontation, but Crockett's response was bigger than the moment. It spoke not only to Giuliani but to everyone watching, everyone who has ever been dismissed, insulted, or underestimated. That is what makes a legacy powerful, it transcends the individual encounter and inspires others. When you choose strength over silence, you don't just rewrite your own story, you help others imagine how they might rewrite theirs. This ripple effect is the heart of legacy. Your courage becomes a reference point for others. Your resilience becomes evidence that it is possible. Your authenticity becomes an invitation for others to stand in theirs. Crockett's response was more than personal defense, it was a collective victory for anyone who has ever been labeled unfairly. Another dimension of redefining legacy lies in breaking cycles. For generations, powerful figures have tried to silence or belittle voices that threaten the established order. Every time someone like Crockett refuses to accept those labels, the cycle is weakened, and a new narrative is created. Legacy, then, is not just about your story, but about how your story reshapes the environment for those who come after you. When a woman refuses to be silenced in a space where women have historically been silenced, she redefines what is possible for the next woman who enters that space. When someone from a marginalized background stands firm in the face of prejudice, they redefine what is possible for everyone who shares that background. Giuliani's insult may have been directed at Crockett alone, but her response expanded the horizon for countless others. That is the transformative nature of legacy. It creates pathways for those who follow. Legacy also thrives on consistency. A single powerful moment can be defining, but it is the pattern of responses that truly builds what you are remembered for. Crockett's response was impactful because it was not an isolated act of strength, it aligned with her broader pattern of courage and authenticity. Redefining legacy requires us to think about the cumulative effect of our choices. Every day, in small ways, we are writing the story of how we will be remembered. Do we stand for what we believe even when it is difficult? Do we speak truth even when it is unpopular? Do we respond to disrespect with dignity rather than surrender? These choices add up, and together they form the arc of our legacy. Giuliani's legacy is also being shaped, not by a single insult, but by a repeated pattern of actions that reveal desperation rather than dignity. That contrast shows us how important consistency is in shaping the way history remembers us. There is also an element of intention in redefining legacy. Legacy does not happen by accident, it is created by the choices we make about how to live, act, and respond. When you know the kind of legacy you want to leave, you begin to filter your responses through that vision. If you want to be remembered as someone courageous, then courage must guide your choices even when it is uncomfortable. If you want to be remembered as someone compassionate, then compassion must shape your words even when anger feels easier. Crockett's response to Giuliani showed intentionality. It wasn't reactive, it was rooted in the kind of leader she intends to be remembered as. In our own lives, if we ask ourselves what story we want to leave behind, it becomes easier to shape our responses in alignment with that story. Redefining legacy is about living with that awareness in every moment. Another layer of legacy lies in influence. Legacy is not only about what you achieve for yourself but about how your actions ripple into the lives of others. Crockett's response carried influence because it gave others permission to be bold. Influence expands legacy beyond the individual and turns it into a shared movement. We all have influence, whether we realize it or not. The way we respond to insults influences how others respond when they are insulted. The way we carry ourselves under pressure influences how others carry themselves under pressure. The way we define our worth influences how others perceive their own worth. Every action becomes a model, every response a teaching moment, every choice a seed planted in the lives of others. When you redefine legacy, you are not just rewriting your own story, you are contributing to the stories of everyone watching. Finally, redefining legacy means understanding that it is always within your power to reclaim the narrative, no matter how others try to frame it. Giuliani tried to write a story where Crockett was diminished, but she rewrote it in real time by refusing to accept his version. That moment serves as a reminder that no matter what others say about you, they do not have the final word. You do. Legacy is not built on what others call you, it is built on how you answer back through your words, your actions, and your presence. You can choose to let insults define you, or you can choose to let your resilience, your strength, and your truth define you. That choice, repeated over and over, is how legacy is redefined.